Good evening and welcome to Real Fellas Talk Sports. My name is Larry Abels and I'll be your host for this evening. And joining me are two distinguished panelists that I'm sure you're familiar with. First, we'll start in Indianapolis, the sports capital of the world. David Burnett, how are you, David?
I'm doing fine, and thanks for that acknowledgement of my fine city of Indianapolis, the Circle City, the capital of sports, the fastest place in racing. Thank you.
Okay, and also joining me is old high school classmate, Chuck Snowden. How you doing, Chuck?
Hey, Larry, I'm doing wonderful, and I just love David's. I love the way David comes in every week. It's amazing, and I just hope our Hoosiers tonight, David, can get a victory over Penn State in college basketball. So
I'm hoping for you.
Yeah, and of course, I'm looking forward to our happy hour. So I can't wait to get started, Larry.
All
right, let's do this. First up is going to be the college football championship game. What are your thoughts on it? David, what are your thoughts on the game?
Lord have mercy. No, it was an out and out beat down. The question is, should Georgia have beaten them that badly? One of my close friends of mine on Facebook mentioned it's not a good look to beat a team that badly because what does it prove? TCU, though, let me say this about TCU. They are not 65-7 worse than Georgia. They just got caught up in a maelstrom and got their asses kicked. It happens in football. It's happened in the Super Bowl. Remember Denver getting beaten like that every single time they were in the Super Bowl? It happens.
Okay. Chuck, what do you think? Did Cinderella turn into a pumpkin or something?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't think. You know how
how do you feel? Tell us how you feel.
I know I've kind of indicated this all season. As we were coming into the playoff, I never thought TCU was legit. I just didn't do it. That conference. I think there's two conferences: the SEC and the Big Ten, and the rest of that stuff is so we feel good about the participatory other conferences and let everybody in. We'll cut up orange slices afterwards and the whole thing. And you see what happens when you do that, when you send grown-ass men to play that group. Look, Georgia, they've got 50 or 60 five-star top athletes. They put 15 dudes got drafted off that team last year. They're a juggernaut, but so is Alabama, and so is LSU. And I think it's the two conferences. I think it's the Big Ten, and I think it's the SEC, and that's just how I feel. And so if you think a beatdown is 600 yards of offense and 185 against 185 yards of offense between the two teams is a beatdown, yeah, it sure is. And also, in the one last quick point, to think that Max Duggan was the runner-up to the Heisman over Stetson Bennett. I didn't like that either.
So let me throw a question out to you all. Are we being guilty of recency bias? Because just last week, it didn't look that bad. Yeah, actually, TCU beat the Big Ten team.
Yeah, I addressed that last week. They had 2 pick sixes. Michigan fumbled on the 1-yard line on the first play when I thought it was a touchdown anyway, and they reversed the call. Then on another time, they were down on the 2-yard line. They tried to run some stupid reverse, lost 25 yards when they're the number 1 team in terms of power football, in terms of just bullying it. So they blew that. I don't know what Harbaugh was thinking. TCU never should have won that game.
But nevertheless, they did.
I know.
They last week we had 2 high-scoring games because I think most of us were kind of surprised. And David, I'll let you talk about this. Were you surprised that Georgia didn't beat Ohio State worse than they did?
No, Ohio State is a 5-star program.
Exactly.
When Chuck was talking about all the teams from the SEC and equating the SEC and the Big Ten, he forgot to mention the actual Big Ten teams: Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin. Those are real football programs and are not to be played with. Let me include Penn State. They're not to be toyed with. Those are real programs. But that said, let me defend TCU.
Okay.
And I'll defend them again. TCU is a legitimate program that got caught. They're not. It'd be one thing if Georgia was playing Georgia State. They're not. TCU could beat just about anybody except, of course, Kansas State. They couldn't beat Georgia. Who's going to beat Georgia? And my daughter's laughing at me because she told me this is what was going to happen. But she's biased.
And David's right. The only other team that could have beat Georgia, and they almost did, I know that's horseshoes, was Ohio State, who also is loaded with pros all over the place. And quite frankly, if Marvin Harrison had not gone down in that game, maybe they would have won. Or the field goal kicker would have made the. So what I'm saying is the Ohio States and Alabamas and LSUs and the Georgias, they are just loaded with talent. And even though they weren't, I didn't think, tried to run up the score, their second and third teams are so superior, TCU just couldn't stop them.
I like that it's decided on the field. I'm a proponent of that.
I know.
And Michigan crushed Ohio State. So, I mean,
it's confusing.
Yeah.
Things can happen in football.
I have to give TCU credit for beating Michigan. I mean, because I think you guys go back and look at the tape. I was advocating, I just want to see Michigan and Georgia play.
Right.
But on a given Saturday, I really my opinion, I kind of just think matchups against Georgia was just not there. They might have matched up better against Michigan. And a lot of games I saw this year, TCU scored a lot of points. They couldn't score. They couldn't score at all. They had no. I wasn't impressed with their defense. But sometimes when you have offense taking up time of possession, it keeps other teams from running up the score.
Right.
They had 3 and outs. Now, so we kind of touched on this because you guys are talking about the superiority of the leagues, of the conferences. Do you think this will weigh in the mind of the voters next year when we go to the 12-team playoff? Are we going to have more than 2 or 3 teams that are not in the Big Ten or the SEC? And is that good for college football? David,
well, first of all, let me just say this. The 12-team playoff doesn't happen next year. It'll happen the year after next year. So they'll still have 4 next year. But to your point, I think on some level, there's going to be a bias against the unexpected team, the Cincinnatis or the TCUs, just because. But the 12-team playoff will fix that. And eventually, one of those smaller teams will win.
Do you think more than one or two will get in?
Regardless of how many 5-star players that the Georgias and the Ohio States and the LSUs have, I think eventually it's going to happen. I'd like to see North Dakota State go big time at some point. How many times can they beat up on Division on 1AA teams? They win all the time, except this year, of course. South Dakota State got them.
But okay, Chuck, what about you? Do you think that's going to result in outside of the Big Ten and SEC? Do you think?
I think it's going to hurt them. I do, but 12 teams is a lot. So again, I don't know how to connect the dots or follow the money, but this thing is still about money on some level.
Absolutely.
And so the more of the country that's represented in a tournament is going to be, I think, somewhat lucrative. However, I still don't think you can get around Ohio State, Michigan, LSU. And LSU is going to catch up to these Alabamas and Georgias because that guy, Kelly, is a pretty good coach, et cetera. And then those conferences are expanding, right? Because isn't the Big Ten picking up USC and UCLA?
UCLA,
and isn't the SEC picking up Texas and somebody else?
Texas and Oklahoma.
Yes, interesting. I would prefer a 8-team playoff instead of 12. I don't like the idea that the first 4 teams are going to get byes, and then some teams are going to get to play at home that first round. So I just see a mess happening. I see TCU going into Georgia. Well, Georgia will probably be one of the top teams. So let's say TCU going into maybe Ohio State and having to play them in the first round. Like I can just see them getting routed at the big house.
Well, I kind of disagree with that, but I'm looking forward to the 12-team playoff. I think the more the merrier. Every other NCAA division has 16 teams in the playoffs.
And that's a little different. 4 teams don't get a bye.
They'll work it out at some point, because at this point, remember just a decade ago, we were still only dealing with 2 teams. Then we moved to 4 teams. So it happens in steps.
And do we really need more than 8? That's my question.
Hey, listen,
I think so. Does the
think,
NFL need more than 14?
Well, I'm going to talk about them soon.
But David is right about something. I don't know if he said it in this show or in our production meeting, but the NIL and the transfer portal may even it out a little bit, maybe. I don't know that I necessarily believe in that, but I don't think the basketball tournament, which is one of the great sporting events in this America, I just don't think it's apples and oranges with football. Because I wouldn't put Mike Tyson in the ring with Sugar Ray Leonard. I just wouldn't. And
that makes sense. But keep in mind, there are going to be some circumstances where players who are not getting the playing time at Alabama, at LSU, at Ohio State. Remember, Joe Burrow was 3rd string at Ohio State. He didn't have an opportunity to play. He went down to LSU, had 1 year that he was so-so, and then 1 year where he became great. But he wouldn't have been the Joe Burrow that we know if he didn't transfer. He'd have been stuck behind Dwayne Haskins. Yeah. And it turns out he was way better than Dwayne Haskins, or he became way better than Dwayne Haskins. So I think you're going to see some of these Alabama players who are 2nd, 3rd string, Oklahoma players, Ohio State players. Some of them are going to move to where they can play. Michael Penix from your school, Indiana University.
Yep.
He went to Washington.
Had a great year.
For over 4,000 yards this year.
Did.
He wouldn't have done that at IU.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have done that at IU. So he got a better opportunity somewhere else. And I think that's going to shake out, but it's going to take time for that to play.
Justin Fields transferred from Georgia to Ohio State. He started out at the University of Georgia.
Well, I think the my concern is that only a couple of Joe Bernard, he likes it, but no team should get about it. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching too.
I just hope that some of the smaller schools, less schools get a chance, because every year it could be 1 or 2 years where a school like TCU has a good team. They might not have a sustained performance like Georgia, Ohio State, but it's possible that they can come up with a decent team. I think TCU was 5-7 last year.
So they were in the finals, and you're right, Larry. They were in the finals. They were in the finals. But here's the thing. And we this group here, we love sports and we love the big games. But I don't know about you two, but I turned that thing off at halftime. Is that a good look? Is that a good look for college football to switch channels at halftime of the national championship game?
Well, but again, I think we're looking at one game.
Yeah,
where there was a blowout. How many times? I think between the 3 of us, we've probably each seen every single Super Bowl. I've seen every single Super Bowl. When I tell a young person, I've seen every single Super Bowl. No kidding. Yeah, I'm old. And how many Super Bowls have turned out to be blowouts where you wanted to turn it off, but maybe you were stuck with, commercials. So maybe what the college football thing has got to do, get some better commercials, get some other reasons for people to stay tuned.
Hey, Richard, how you doing? Good to see you, brother. Okay, let's move on to the NFL. So we have 6 games this week. 2 teams are getting byes. So let's look at each game going, and I want you guys to tell me, your thoughts on the game before the game. But one thing I want to ask, and all of us have seen all the Super Bowls, Can you ever remember any playoffs where they've had 3 third-string quarterbacks potentially starting?
No.
To show you how old I am, I remember when Tom Matty.
Oh yeah,
from the Colts. Super Bowl.
From the Colts.
Yeah, when Johnny Unitas and Earl Morrall got hurt, and Quazzo was the backup. I'm sorry, they got hurt, and Tom Matty was a running back with first guy to have the plays on his arm. But I can't remember a playoff with third-string quarterbacks. Speaking
of, second-string quarterback has been in the Super Bowl. Who played pretty much that whole season with the Earl Morrall.
Right.
He did it twice, both with Baltimore and then with Miami.
Billy Kilmer did it with Washington, but third-string quarterbacks. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Third string.
And what I'm thinking about, there's a good chance that Baltimore's second-string quarterback is in concussion protocol, and Lamar Jackson hasn't played for 3 weeks. Miami's down to their third-string quarterback. Then we have San Francisco with their third-string quarterback that might be better than the first 2 quarterbacks that started before.
They might have a big decision to make out if that team goes on the run, like I think they might. They might have a big quarterback decision to make.
Let me just say this. Remember in 2001 when Tom Brady usurped what's the guy?
Drew Bledsoe.
Yeah,
Drew Bledsoe. That was shocking because Bledsoe was a top-tier quarterback. Sometimes Bill Belichick sensed something and he went with it, and the rest is history. Brock Purdy could be I'm not saying he's going to be like Tom Brady, but he's just in the same sense as where Tom Brady was. Tom Brady was a 6th-round draft pick who was splitting time at Michigan. Splitting time, in his senior season. So you never know. It looks like Brock Purdy is the guy for San Francisco.
Yeah, he looks better than the other 2 guys that were playing before him.
But, absolutely.
But my thing, normally when you go to the third-string quarterback, your season's done. I mean, we've had plenty of second-string quarterbacks like the guy in Philadelphia that came in for Wentz. Knowles was the guy that came in for Wentz from Philly. They won the Super Bowl. We've had guys, Hostel in New York. They came in, a lot of them have won. But when you get to the third string, normally you're done.
Let me just say a shout out to my man, Joe Bernard. He and I battle sometimes on Facebook, but a lovely guy. We have some differences politically, but he's a nice guy from the DC area. Great guy. And I'm glad he's watching. Thanks. And Joe, I know you've seen every Super Bowl too. I just wanted to shout out to you.
Joe's got 2 handsome fellas with him too.
Okay, first game I want you guys to think about: Chargers and Jaguars. Looks like a interesting matchup there. Chuck, who do you like in that game?
Well, I tell you, that's a good one, Larry. That really is a good one. What Doug Peterson has done with Jacksonville and with Sunshine or Trevor Lawrence, it's remarkable, quite frankly. And so I think the Chargers-Jaguar game may be the closest playoff game of the ones this weekend. I really, if I had to pick a team, I think I'm going with the Jaguars.
Okay. David, your thoughts on that game?
I think it's going to be an interesting game from the media standpoint because you've got 2 high-profile quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, who the media just loves to death. He's got a great arm, a great understanding of the game, against Trevor Lawrence, who has really improved his game. His rookie season, I didn't know. I thought he might have been a bust, but he's had a heck of a year. Based on that, it's going to be at Jacksonville.
Yeah.
There's just something that happens in big games to the Chargers. I'm going with Jacksonville. And I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a breakout game, and Jacksonville's not to be toyed with at this point.
No, I would want to play him, period. And quite frankly, I like the coach. I think Peterson is a better coach than the San Diego coach. And so this Jaguar thing, they got something going there. They do. They really do.
So
How about you? How about you? How about you, Larry? Who do you like?
I'm the moderator, man.
Moderators can have
I'll flip
opinions
a
now.
coin on that game. I think
No.
Jacksonville's defense is played well lately.
Yes.
I get a slight edge to them just being at home.
Yeah, I agree.
We got the Dolphins and the Bills now. I think maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, before Tua went into concussion protocol, this might have looked like a more interesting game. Your thoughts on it, David?
You got to go with the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen he's a tremendous young quarterback. At some point, he was probably going to get hurt because of the way he runs, but right now, he looks like Superman.
Yeah.
Buffalo's playing at home. It's going to be hard to beat him. Miami, if Tua was playing, I think it would be close. But keep in mind, I think the reason Tua is not playing, I don't know that it's just because of lingering effects. I think it's just the overall impact of the way he's had as a season, and then added on to what just happened to the player from the Bills.
Lamar.
You know, I wouldn't play Tua this year at all, regardless. I just wouldn't.
3 concussions. That's kind of tough for anybody.
I think you got to put him on a shelf for now at this point, and hope and pray. Hope and pray that it doesn't open up again next year, the next time he gets tackled very hard. But once you start getting concussions, they just start repeating themselves.
Yeah.
Chuck, what do you think about that game?
I think it's the Bills big time. Everything David said, and then you add on top of America right now is rooting for DeMar. You know, they're rooting for Buffalo. So if your team's not in the playoff or in a game, the country's pulling for Buffalo because of DeMar. And I think that matters. And I definitely think that matters in Buffalo. So I think Buffalo wins by a lot.
I was gonna ask you guys, is this Georgia and TCU?
Maybe not like that. Because I think Miami will put up a fight. I do. Even with a backup quarterback, I think they'll put up a fight. And Buffalo has a way of, not always plays down to its competition sometimes or something. But I still think it's going to be all Bills.
Really, you think that about Buffalo, huh?
Sometimes
let me get you to this next game, the Giants and the Vikings. Chuck, you can start with that. And just a little hint, when you playing down to their competition, kind of was my segue here.
So what did the Vikings end up 13-4 or 12-5? Anyway,
13 and 4.
Yeah, something like that.
So I mean, they're the most misleading, great record team in these playoffs, maybe in the last few years. I just think they're a fraud on some level. And I do think Jefferson's a great receiver. Cousins, and he's just kind of an average quarterback. But I don't like the Giants either. And this game is played in Minnesota.
Yeah.
In the dome.
In the dome, I think I might give the edge to Minnesota.
David, what do you think?
By a field goal.
By a field goal.
Let me just say this in defense of Kirk Cousins, who I don't particularly care for, but I think he's going to have a breakout game. I really do. That said, whether he has a breakout game or not, the Giants are going to be in the game. They're going to be in the game. And Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than people give him credit for. He doesn't have the splashy stats, but he's a fast guy. He can run. And if I was Dable, the coach, I would have Daniel Jones in a number of read option plays and running more often. I would have him run at least 15 times. I think that's the opportunity for them to win.
I think the key is whether Barkley can run. Now I agree that I would definitely run Jones, but I think if Barkley has a good game, Minnesota might be in trouble.
Wow,
I think that's going to be the key.
So let's go on record.
Minnesota being in trouble is not unexpected.
Right.
Well,
let's go on the record. Who wins that game, Larry?
Smart money still got to go with Minnesota.
Yeah. How about you, Dave?
The Giants can score, which is a big problem. But if I'm looking for them to hold the ball, if Barkley can run the ball, and it could in a close game, it could be anybody's game?
I think it could be anybody's game, but in theory, you got to go with the Vikings. They're playing at home. They're playing in 70-degree weather in the dome, but they disappoint so often.
I know.
And Kirk Cousins, as good a quarterback as he is, $40 million or whatever he's getting paid, he will have a boo-boo, boo-boo. And I'm counting on him to have a boo-boo at some point, some critical point, like in the fourth quarter, Vikings driving down the field, pass thrown, pick six. That's what Kirk Cousins will do. He will delight you early, and he will send you to misery later.
Well, here's something. I'm sitting there thinking all of us had a little bit of respect for Jacksonville, right?
Yep.
They were 9-8, and all of us had some doubt about a 13-14.
It's crazy, isn't it? Don't make sense to it.
Let's not go to court. Let's not get on the stand because the defense was obliterated.
I hear you.
Next game, another game that I think we would be salivating if the third string quarterback wasn't playing. Bengals versus Ravens. First of all, do either of you guys think that Lamar Jackson is going to play? And we'll start with you, Chuck. Keep in mind he hasn't practiced for 5 weeks.
I know. I think he's going to play. I think he's going to test it and see what happens. I do. I don't know how effective, because of what you just said, he's been out for 5 weeks. Is that game in Baltimore?
No. It's in Cincinnati.
Yeah. So I think he's going to give it a shot. I don't know how effective he's going to be. I want the Ravens. I really do like Burrows and Cincinnati's receivers. If Lamar plays, they got a puncher's chance. If Lamar doesn't play, I think Cincinnati wins that game.
I think it doesn't matter whether Lamar plays or not. He hasn't played in 5 weeks. Lamar's game is running. He's a pretty good passer, but he has nobody to pass to on a consistent basis. Baltimore's offense is so predictable, and I like Baltimore, and I like Harbaugh as a coach. He's a tough guy. I like him, but I just can't see them winning in Cincinnati. Cincinnati has got something going. Joe Burrow is a pretty damn good quarterback.
You think?
He's pretty darn good. And even if Lamar was healthy, I think I'd have to go with Cincinnati.
Yeah.
What about if the number 2 quarterback can play? He was in and let me back up. Further about Lamar, not only has he not played, he has not even practiced for 5 weeks. I think that's very significant there. But the number 2 quarterback is this guy Huntley.
Tyler Huntley.
Yeah. Baltimore's actually been like 3-3 with Jackson out, and Huntley won a couple of those games. Not that he's the answer, I don't think he's as good as Jackson. But do you think would that change your opinion about this game if he plays?
Well, they don't light up the scoreboard. I don't even when Lamar plays, they don't. But that defense is stout now. That defense is legit, especially now that they got Roquan in the middle holding that thing down. So I don't know that Cincinnati's going to score a bunch on them. I just don't know how the Ravens are going to score. I don't know where the points are going to come from.
And that's something I was going to bring up with you guys. You might remember early in the season, Baltimore's defense gave up big points against Miami and Buffalo in the fourth quarter.
Don't do that.
Now they're like number 3 in terms of points differential, and they've turned it around. Even though, unfortunately for them, their offense doesn't score. David, any more thoughts on this game?
I just see the Bengals manhandling the Ravens. The Ravens right now, to me, are on a downward spiral, just like they were last season. Toward the end of the season, as much as I respect John Harbaugh as a coach, he needs to become a little bit more inventive or put some more pressure on his offensive coordinators. You can't just always be a defensive-minded team. You can't. Yeah. You got to put points on the board, and you cannot always depend on Lamar to run you into victory, because at some point he that's going to stop. And right now he's had 2 straight seasons of missing 5 games. And it looks like to me that's a potential trend that can continue.
Yeah, he's missed the last 5 games of the season for both. Jackson, we're talking about, missed the last 5 games of both the last 2 years.
Yeah.
That's not leading into a conversation we had maybe earlier this season about the contract situation, does it?
Well, maybe that's why he don't have a contract.
Well, the question is the certainty of the kind of money he wanted to make. Is it still there?
Well, we're going to cover that in a few minutes. So we'll stick with the games now. We'll get back to that because that's one of our agenda about his contract.
Another thing I'll say quickly about the Ravens, just real quick.
Go ahead.
So they went out and got some weapons. They got this wide receiver from Minnesota college, and they added some running backs, and that tight end is pretty good. And they tried D-Jack, but it never works out. Like, they always get injured. It's not just Lamar that gets injured. The running backs get injured. The wide receivers get injured. So they've had some really tough luck in the last couple of years.
Let me give a shout out real quick to my buddy Daryl Pullins. We've been buddies since we were babies. So 60+ year friendship. He's like a brother to me. Glad he's watching. He always tells me he watches every week. And I appreciate it, Daryl. Thank you.
Where's Daryl? Hey, thanks, Daryl. Hey, David, where's Daryl located?
Right here in Indianapolis.
Love it.
His mom and my mom were best friends.
Oh, wow.
And we became friends when we were babies.
Wow.
And we're still friends as old men.
Okay. Seahawks and 49ers. David, we'll start with you.
I like the Seahawks to potentially upset. And I started this football season championing Geno Smith. He has not failed me. And I put Seattle back into my favorite team category because Geno looks so smooth and confident. I think, and they know the 49ers. It's not like they don't know the 49ers. They know what 49ers can do. They have a chance. I still would say the 49ers should win that game, even with Brock Purdy. But I think it will be a dogfight between those two teams. But I would go for San Francisco by a little.
Okay. Chuck, who do you have in that?
So David's right. David is right. 17, 18 weeks ago, I told him that Geno was a career backup dog, quite frankly. And what did he do? Work himself into the all-pro team. And he might be a hot commodity because I think his contract might be up at the end of the year.
It is up.
And I even heard somebody in Washington say things like, should Geno be somebody they should go after? So my point is, David he called that. He nailed it. Congratulations. So he should
Thank
take
you,
his
sir.
And but I don't think they're going to beat the 49ers. I think the 49ers are a juggernaut. And I'll tell you what the 49ers did duck. Christian McCaffrey guy, the fact that he stayed healthy since they picked him up, I think that's huge for them. So
and Debo's healthy now too.
Yeah.
Debo's
yes,
healthy.
exactly. It's actually a little scary, really. I mean, they are really a solid, balanced team. So I like the 49ers to win that game.
Okay, the last game on the agenda, Cowboys and Bucks. Chuck, who's going to win that game?
Is the GOAT playing in that game? The GOAT?
If you're referring to Tom Brady, yes.
I think Tom Brady and Tampa, even though Tampa was 8-9 this year, I think the Bucks are going to pull that out. It's going to take a yeoman effort, and Dak has to do a couple of mistakes as well. And but I think the Bucks are going to pull that game out. That to me is a very interesting game. That's on Monday night, the last game of the playoff of the weekend. The whole nation will be watching. And I think that is a very interesting football game.
David, who do you think?
I would say the pressure is on Dallas tremendously. They are the number one NFL team, in terms of media exposure and fan demand. Dak Prescott, a lot of pressure on him. The coach, a lot of pressure on him. I think Dallas has to win that game.
Mm-hmm.
They have to win the game or things will change. Dallas hasn't won squat in more than 20 years. Nothing. Won a handful of playoff games in 25 years. That's it. But I think they're going to win because they have to win. Are they better than Tampa Bay? Yeah, in theory, on paper, they are. Will they do it? Well, Dallas lets you down too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they certainly didn't seem to show up at all last week to me, which I thought really they looked unprofessional.
Oh my
I mean, they didn't just look bad; they looked unprofessional. Because I don't even think Washington played that well, and they won that game handily. They had like 9 3-and-outs or something like that.
10
Okay,
3-and-out.
yeah, it was.
And the guy threw a pick six that the Fuller dropped. And what did he do? He threw on the very next play.
Yeah. He said, "Let me try this again."
And he did. I mean, he was throwing the ball into the ground. I don't know, man. It was not a good, like you said, Larry, it was horrible. And that's not how you want to perform going into the playoffs when you knew they were playing for something. And the interesting part about that is that coach kept that starting team in all the way to the end of that game. Yeah. Even when it looked like it was over, pretty much till the end of the game, they kept them in there. And I'll tell you, and this is maybe a small thing, but one more thing. They don't play well, according to the stats, they don't play well on grass. And Tampa Bay has that Bermuda grass. They look faster on the turf. I'm talking about Dallas. And I think all the tea leaves are lined up that might be the upset, but we'll see.
Let me say another shout out to my boy Terry Reed down in Atlanta, Georgia, from Naptown, Indianapolis, Indiana. Terry Reed, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. And thanks for staying in touch.
Hey, Terry, when you say we, who is he talking about? Dallas?
He's talking about his Cowboys.
That's what he's talking about.
Thanks
for joining us, Terry.
He is a
Appreciate it.
Staunch Cowboy man.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad.
What was the question?
Oh, we were just talking about who's going to win the Bucks Cowboys game, and you said they had to win, so you feel like they'll win, David.
They have to win. They do have to win.
I think if Dallas is in a close game at the end, they're in trouble. Oh. They need to come out playing. Because going against Brady down the stretch.
I don't know what happened to Dallas all year, and I don't know if this happened or something recently, but whoever plays that other corner outside of on the other side of Diggs, oh my goodness, I don't think he's very good. And I think that that's got to be a scary feeling to think that he's not that good, and Tom Brady and Mike Evans are on the other side. So it's going to be interesting to see if Tom will exploit that situation.
And is it really the cornerback, or is Dallas's pass rush not what it was earlier this year? I think great pass rushers make great quarterbacks.
I agree.
Amen.
And if our other companion Go Earl was here, he raised the question a few weeks ago. Where's Michael Parsons?
No.
I know he's been playing hurt. I'm not going to beat up on him because he's been showing up every week. But he certainly appeared to be more dominant earlier in the season.
Yet Dallas left him in almost that whole game against the Commanders.
Out of all of these games, Chargers versus Jaguars, we thought that was pretty even, right? I agree.
Yep.
And we thought Dallas and the Bucks were pretty even.
Yeah.
But the other games, Bills, Dolphins, Vikings, Giants, Bengals, Ravens, and 49ers, Seahawks, I think they're favorites in all of those games. Rarely do things go according to chalk. Who's going to be upset this week out of today's games?
Well, the upset that I picked, and again, I know you summed it up the way you just summed it up, but I thought I think the Cowboys will be favored in the game against Tampa.
Okay. I
haven't looked at that.
They're probably.
But I thought the Bucks was going to have. That's where I was picking for an upset. Okay. The Bucks.
I think if there is an upset, even though I do believe Minnesota should win, I think the upset would be the Giants over Minnesota.
That's the game I would pick too.
Mm.
I don't know why we don't think of 13 and 14. We'll praise a 9 and 8 team. To that point, and I wanted to throw this at you guys because I think we're going to finish up with mostly the NFL tonight. To that point, NFL expanded to 14 teams last year.
Mm-hmm.
And one of you raised while I was talking about the college, should the NFL have 14 teams?
Mm-hmm.
I want to throw that back at you guys because when I looked at the way Seattle got in and the way Miami got in, those are very discouraging games for me. Then we got two teams, Jacksonville and Tampa, that are barely 500, or one of them might not even be 500.
Tampa's not 500.
The NFL always, in my view, always had the right number of teams in there. Do you think they really need 7 teams? And I'll start with you, David.
The NFL can do whatever it wants to do.
Sure, they can put everybody.
They always do it. Should they?
That's the question.
I don't have a problem with it. And to be honest with you, I don't have a problem with it. Remember, the NFL was a league that didn't want the All-American Football League to come in with the Cleveland Browns. The NFL is a league that didn't want the AFL to join. But when everybody merged together, it was still a better thing. When Cleveland, which was the best team in professional football in the 40s and 50s, came to the NFL got better. When the AFL joined the NFL got better. So sometimes you need more teams. You need more exposure. The NFL doesn't lose here. They're going to get millions of fans watching. It's going to be quite a weekend. And if you didn't have this many teams playing, you wouldn't have the same level of interest.
Interesting. Chuck, what do you think?
I thought that was well said, and I don't have a problem with it at all, to be honest with you. And in fact, if you go a step further, I know they didn't play well, and I'm just saying this, though. If the Packers were in this thing or the Lions were in this thing, I think they could beat some of those teams on this list, too. I think there was more parity in the National Football League this year. And David used to say all season, on any given Sunday in this league this year, there's a lot of parity. So I have no problem with it. And as we talked about those games that are coming up, we said most of them are even.
I see mediocrity. I think they had exactly right. They were the one league I thought had the right number of playoff teams. As much as I like basketball, I think they have too many.
Weren't the Bengals in the Super Bowl last year?
Yeah,
they were.
Oh, I mean, so let's look at this. I mean, I think you have
that's the difference of college and pros, in my opinion. That's what I'm
trying. But I look at the AFC. What do you have? The Bengals, the Bills, the Chiefs. Who am I missing? They're all. Yeah, he went down the tubes. Yeah, but those 3 teams are like really good teams, And the Dolphins were up there before their quarterback got hurt, and the Ravens were up there before their quarterback got hurt. So if they had it. Let's say everybody's healthy, just for argument's sake, they would have like 5 really good teams there. And the other thing I'll throw out there, I mean, I just look at the way I presented this. I'm seeing 8 and 9 teams and a 9 and 8 team. They end by virtue of winning their division. And just those last couple of games, I don't know why the NFL didn't show Seattle's game at night instead of showing Seattle earlier, because that eliminated Detroit.
Right.
And I was watching Seattle's game because I'm really rooting for Pittsburgh to get in there.
Right.
And that was like an ugly game. And the Miami game was ugly. And I'm saying these guys are actually making the playoffs. But I'll get off my high horse.
But I give Detroit a lot of credit because even though they were out, they played their butt off against
They were professional. I looked at them as the antithesis of what I saw with Dallas.
Right, exactly.
They were professional. Dallas to me was like
100% right.
Let me show a question from my man Terry.
Okay.
And this is an interesting question because this is the defending Super Bowl champions, and they have fallen hard. What do we think about that?
The worst fall of any defending champion.
It's been bad.
Well, I think we can sum it up by saying this. Last year they loaded up to go for it, and they won a Super Bowl. And then some of those guys defected. Some people had injuries. Some people signed big contracts, and it all fell apart. Cooper Kupp was hurt. They never
Aaron
figured out.
Donald.
Aaron Donald was hurt. The wide receiver Odell never came back. They never had a running game. So and the quarterback got hurt.
And the guy that went to the Bills,
Von Miller, went to Buffalo. So they just had a lot of injuries. And David told me earlier this year, because we brought this question up before, and David said, not that many teams go back to back anyway. It's tough after a Super Bowl.
But I think they had the worst record of any defending Super Bowl champion.
I agree.
But yeah, that's a good question. It's probably a lot of reasons for different personnel. They had to play a first place schedule this year. I don't know what they did the year before, and some other teams got better.
Now the coach wants out.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me.
Weird.
Okay, a couple of more things we're going to get to, but one other thing I want to ask you guys: how do you guys look at Philadelphia right now? I think a few weeks ago most of us thought they were definitely maybe the cream of the crop. Do you guys still look at them that way? David, I'll start with you.
Absolutely.
Still do?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they're the best team in the NFC. I think Kansas City is the best team in the AFC, and that's why those two teams have the byes. I think if the quarterback doesn't get hurt at some point in these playoffs, Philadelphia will be in the NFC Championship game against somebody, but one of them is going to be Philadelphia.
Okay, Chuck, you still think?
I think they're very strong. I love them. They haven't lost anything in my eyes. In fact, not only did the quarterback come back, but they got some defensive linemen back. But you got to watch those 49ers. As Philly has had that performance all year long and been very good, but the 49ers have been building and building and building, added a piece or two. And like you said, Debo's back. McCaffrey's playing well. Wow, that would be a heck of a NFC championship game, the 49ers versus the Eagles.
Yeah, at one time I thought the Terry's chiming in again. At one time I thought Philly was head and shoulders above everybody. I think the 49ers are right there with them. And that's going to be interesting if they face each other.
I think the big deal with the 49ers is they have a lockdown defense.
They do. Yes. But they do have a third-string quarterback. Even though he's played well.
The third-string quarterback is just a rookie who was selected last. That doesn't mean anything.
Right.
In hindsight, it really doesn't mean anything. He's worthy of being a starter. And they've got some questions. Trey Lance is in trouble.
They got
Trey Lance. I got two more things I want to talk about before we wrap the show up. Houston, do we have a problem there? Houston has had two black coaches. The last two hires have been black coaches, which is the good news. The bad news is both of them were fired after 1 year. What gives? Chuck, I'll start with you.
I just think they're a poor organization. I mean, JJ, pushing the black coach thing aside for just 1 second. Okay. JJ Watt wanted out, and they had built a community. They built the defense around him. The community loved him. He's a stand-up guy. The wide receiver, Hopkins, wanted out. He left. That place, the ownership, poor organization. I just think they're a poor organization, period. I do.
David, what your thoughts on them?
I agree with Chuck. Right now, it's a dysfunctional organization, dysfunctional owner who right now is flirting with hiring a coach. Josh McCown, I believe, is the one that they got in mind. And they're really lining everything up so that this guy who's never coached professionally, and I think is a high school assistant, he's lined up to be head coach. I mean, that's absurd.
That's ridiculous.
That's absurd. Lovie Smith is an outstanding coach. Didn't do so well at the University of Illinois, but college and pro are two different types of coaching. And what's my man's name? David Culley. That's the gentleman who was the coach before.
Previous coach. Yeah.
Long-time assistant. He was treated very poorly. And Houston's got to own that. Houston and its ownership has to own the fact that they've treated two black men like garbage, and that ain't right.
And what could they have expected out of them either year? I mean, last year their quarterback is going to sit out the whole year,
They have
and
a
this
rookie.
year,
They have a rookie quarterback last year, and he's a second
yeah,
year this year.
and this year, based on last year's team, it's something
Unfair.
just doesn't seem right to me.
The other question, the follow up to that is, what will the Carolina Panthers do with their black head coach, who I thought showed a lot of fight? That Panthers team showed a lot of fight down the stretch,
Steve Wilkes
and they
finished
He
6-6
500,
as the interim coach.
Yeah.
6-6.
It's gonna be interesting.
And that was not a good team.
Last thing we're going to switch to, back to our favorite quarterback up the road in Baltimore for Chuck and I, Lamar Jackson. Last 2 years, as we've mentioned previously on the show, he's missed the last 5 games of the season. He's a free agent. Does he get the money that he's seeking, or is he going to have to come down off of his demands? David, what do you think?
I think he's still an icon in Baltimore. Baltimore is a different type of city. We cannot look at it in any other way. I used to live 45 miles from downtown Baltimore. Baltimore is completely different from DC. They love Lamar Jackson. I think he'll get the money. Does he? If he was in any other city, I don't think he would get it. I think in Baltimore he will get the money.
Chuck, do you think
I'm just not as convinced, even though I love the guy. And I don't think it's just about his injuries. I think with the Kyler Murray situation, with the quarterback in Denver situation, it's just going to be tough. So, and when you say he's a free agent, he's not an unrestricted free agent, though. In other words, whatever he gets, Baltimore can match. Is that
no? But Baltimore can put him on the franchise tag him.
Oh, they can franchise.
Yeah, they can franchise tag him.
He's unrestricted, but team can franchise him if they choose to.
Right.
I think that his style of play is really going to hurt him. I think he's different than Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, but his availability the last 2 years, I mean, he wants Deshaun Watson money, which Cleveland overpaid, and he might have to come down off of that. I look for Baltimore to franchise him.
Yeah, they may do that.
Yeah. Well, that's not bad money. I mean,
Well, whatever Baltimore does, they have to keep him, at least in the short term. And if they franchise tag him for this coming season, that might be a way to see, is he going to give us only 12 games again?
The thing about that's like kicking the can down the road, because that second year of the franchise, that salary goes up significantly.
Well, Kirk Cousins is the captain of the franchise tag.
Well, he's with a dysfunctional team that couldn't make their mind up, and that's really what you have to do. Hey, that's all we got to today. I know we had a pretty good schedule here. Other things we'll bring up in the future. So let's go to closing remarks. David, you have a closing remark for us?
I do. And this is on African-American coaches, and specifically looking at Sean Payton, who right now is getting ready to command a king's ransom. I think he could get a contract worthy of about $15 million a year, which would be just behind Bill Belichick. Does he deserve it? He's a pretty damn good coach. But is he better than Mike Tomlin? No. Yet the word genius is always lavished around Sean Payton, who's had 4 losing seasons. How many losing seasons has Mike Tomlin had? None. How many times has Mike Tomlin ever been called a genius? Never. That's garbage. Part of the whole coach, the quarterback, is partly media driven, and the kind of reputation that you build up. And Sean Payton, you got to give it to him. He certainly has backers behind him. But is he better than my man Mike Tomlin? No, not even. Yet Mike Tomlin, who's high paid, $12 million a year, it isn't lavished the same kind of praise that Sean Payton is. And that's a shame. I want to see more African-American coaches being given the right, not only the right opportunity, but the right praise.
Good point.
Kind of gotta get a job first.
You do.
Chuck.
Mike Tomlin does have a job, though.
A very good one. Good organization, too. Well said, David. So, look, I'm just going to touch on this. When we think of college basketball, and I know we're in the middle of it right now, we think of teams like Kentucky and Villanova and Louisville and Georgetown. Well, let's look at that for a second. Georgetown is 5-13. They haven't won a game in the Big East in 2 years. Louisville is 2-14. Let me repeat, there are 2-14 at Louisville. Villanova, 8-9. Kentucky is 10-6. Last night against South Carolina, they were holding up signs at Kentucky saying, get out, Calipari. Take the job in Texas, leave. So it just seems like in college basketball, some of these blue bloods, even Duke is 12-4 and ranked 24th in the country. North Carolina, I saw them lose again to Villanova or to Virginia last night. They're 11-6. Indiana's 10-5. So it looks like the blue bloods, some of the teams we're used to seeing early on, are not doing so well. And I don't know if it's the transfer portal. I don't know if it's the extra year because of COVID, et cetera. But I find that kind of fascinating and interesting, and I just wanted to make a point about it.
Good point.
Well, my closing comment is going to be about the NBA. I'm an NBA lover, as you guys know, but I'm concerned that the players today don't play. All of us have been around long enough to know that back in the 70s, when the complexion of the league changed, basketball lost its TV contracts, and we were watching the playoffs on tape delay. Seems like light years ago, but when I look around now, I can watch any game. Our local game tonight, three rotational players are out for one reason or the other. Bill, Gafford, and Porzingis. I watched Phoenix last night. They were down to 8 players. Some people are legitimately hurt. Then we got other people, I think David brought up in a meeting, like Kawhi Leonard, who really hasn't played much at all. And almost every team, we have legitimate injuries. I mean, a lot of big stars. Steph Curry just came back. Sure. But NBA players, hear this. You guys need to show up and play because fans spend their hard-earned money to go out and see you. Many times they only have 1 or 2 opportunities a year to see you when you travel to different cities. And when you don't show up and you can't play, you're doing a disservice to them. My 2 cents.
Good point. Good point.
One of the most impressive things about Michael Jordan, he played his last game with the Wizards. He was 40 years old. He played every single game, all 82. He was 40 years old.
Okay.
Indeed.
That's going to be our show for tonight. I want to thank our many viewers for chiming in. We appreciate you a lot, and we'd like to hear your comments. So take care. Remember, we're here every week at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Real Fellas Talk Sports.
Happy hour.